First, let me introduce myself. My name is Natalie Mellas. I teach in the Comparative Literature Department. I'm a member of the Institute for Comparative Modernity. And it's my pleasure to welcome you here today. Thank you for coming out this early in the semester. And we're delighted to be able to host Professor Jacques COURSIL for a lecture today. Before introducing Jacques COURSIL, I would like to extend my thanks to the generous co-sponsors of this event, the Romance Studies Department, the Department of Comparative Literature, Africana Studies, and the Society for the Humanities. And last but not least, Jonathan Culler for bringing Jacques COURSIL to Cornell in the first place. So, and of course, to all of you for coming. If this were not the English Lounge at C58 Goldwin Smith and we were sitting in front of a fire on a dark winter night, you would think she's telling tall tales in my attempt to introduce Jacques COURSIL to you because he is so polymathic and so polyvalent, and it's something we don't often see in a room like this. He is a scholar of linguistics and philosophy and mathematics. He is a literary critic and a celebrated jazz trumpeter. Born in Paris to a Martinican family, Jacques COURSIL was active in the free jazz scene in New York during the late 1960s, recording with artists such as Bill Dixon, Frank Wright, and Sonny Murray. And here's where the polyvalent non sequitur goes. He then went on to earn 2 doctorates, one in mathematics and one in linguistics, at the University of Normandy, where he was later a professor. He also taught at the University of the French West Indies in Martinique, where he taught literature and linguistics, and at Cornell University, where he offered courses in Francophone literature and theory. He is he is an author of many articles on philosophy, linguistics, Antillean literature and thought, and the author of 2 books, La fonction muette du langage from 2000, and more recently, Valeurs pures, le paradigme sémiotique de Ferdinand de Saussure, which came out in 2015. While in Ithaca, in the early 2000s, sort of by chance, I think, Jacques returned to music, and he has since recorded 3 critically acclaimed albums. Minimal Brass, which was recorded here in Ithaca, Clameur, which is an oratorio and has music as well as spoken and sung speech and poetry, and Trail of Tears from Universal in 2010. He is currently working on 2 books, one in linguistics and one of which the presentation he will give us today will be a part on Antillean thought and literature. He is also more immediately working on a filmed dance opera based on the massive experimental poem called L'Oiseau Schizophone, which our friend Alex knows well, by the Haitian experimental poet Franck Etienne, so a film dance opera which he'll be beginning work on later next month. Yeah. And finally, he was awarded the Édouard Glissant Prize in 2017. It's my great pleasure to introduce Jacques COURSIL to me.
We're waiting for the green light on the monitor.
And I meant to press the green one.
Oh, the red.
The red. and sorry, to make...
To remind me of my own biography, because I never remember really, I cannot tell my story, so I'm always happy when somebody does it. One thing, the first thing that comes up to my mind is emotion, because I've been here for some time, and I've been teaching here and meeting, having friends and distinguished scholars, and it was a very intense time. But emotion, as you know, is something that you can feel, but no, I don't have words for that. So don't expect me to talk too much about emotions. I'm not here for that, but to talk about a great poet from Édouard Glissant, read a difficult poet, difficult as a poet and difficult as a man too. But we spent a long time together, having chatting all the time, eating, drinking, and finally criticizing. But as you know, in poets don't like dialogue; they talk. So, and because they're sure of themselves, they say, "Well, the proof is for you, not for me." So I'm going to talk about politics of relations, but not of the book Poetics of Relations, but an overall type of survey of all the books, because finally his writing is extremely concentrated in strong thematics, and he hasn't varied much from the 69 to when he died recently. So, the Poetics of Édouard Glissant is in its various forms, novel, plays, essays, and poems, for the general principle according to which literature is not written with ideas. Literature is written with words. These words are transformed, often destroyed and recomposed. I make a distinction between lexicon and vocabulary. Literature is an activity, maybe the only one, that doesn't have a fixed, proper vocabulary, as opposed to other human practices like empirical or exact sciences, or as well as carpentry or car maintenance. If you don't know the vocabulary, you're nobody. Vocabularies are univocal and possess definitions. Natural lexicon in literature are not fixed, but can combinatory. Poets write directly on the lexicon of languages they use. They create words with words. They know also that, as Wittgenstein would say, that what a word can say, a sentence cannot say. Dans toute langue autorisée se forgera un langage. Tous les langages s'inventent de la langue. La langue ne grandit que par le langage, cette frappe du poète. Je m'arrête là pour vous dire tout de suite que pour ma conclusion, comme je n'en aurai pas. Pardon?
En anglais.
Oh yeah. I just make a point here, just to say that since I would not dare to have a conclusion to talk about when I'm talking about the work of Glissant, I will read some of his poems. So back to the lecture. Glissant's writing, in Glissant's writing, the word relation. The word relation does not escape the rule, and it never has the meaning of its current usage. Glissant insists that it is not a logical or a mathematical relation. In brief, relation doesn't mean relation. Poets make words with words. The word relation is present under two different forms in his writing. First, with a capital R. Under this form, it derives from the verb relater, to relate, and takes on a narrative meaning. The second form, small r, is used to point to an identity relation as opposed to an identity object. The relation with capital R corresponds to a counter-category of history, the relation small r is concerned with subjectivity. So, la relation précède la relation, meaning that history precedes subjectivity. I suppose. Relation, capital R, which inaugurates a new history of the world, is a critique of a global conception which associates worlds and earth, although they are two different things. You can say, well, I'm on the top of the world, but you cannot say I'm on the top of the earth. Those two things are often conflated, but they should not. In brief, the surface of the earth, on the surface of the earth, there is more than one world. There are a plurality of worlds. Glissant calls them le tout monde, the whole world. L'un, notre mal profond, means that what he is after is somehow to break the Germany of the oneness that has been masking somehow the multiplicity of worlds there is on the planet called the two monde. Back to the relation small r, which treats subjectivity as a social reality, which suffers also from the imposition of oneness, and its corollary, strict individuality. It is concerned with the survival of culture in contact. L'Occident se constituait dans la règle d'une spiritualité dont l'intention la plus systématique fut d'isoler l'homme, de le ramener sans cesse à son rôle d'individu, de le confiner à lui-même. The Western world constitutes itself in the rules of a spiritual... The two R's take the form of a diacritic chiasmus, R and R, a telluric criteria which traces the limit of what Glissant called l'intention poétique. Poetic intention, but it's not an intention, precisely. Because intention he means by an eidetic intention, or intention with no other origin than the proper language created by the writer. So the eidetic intention is an intention without origin. And I do not know anything from Glissant that doesn't lie between those two characters. This is the reason why the symbolism R, capital R and small r, are the mark of a poetic à la lettre, to the letter, or a literalness which avoids conceptual generalization and interpretation. Because the Glissant should not be interpreted, should be read and read, and you have to read it again and read it again and read it again. C'est à la lettre mon langage qui m'institue. Talking to this sentence with him, he was really saying that people were calling him, oh, you are a genius. He said, no. The genius is the field that has been chosen, and I dig the field, and the genius things come up. Alors, let's talk about the big relation with our capital R. The history of our spheric world cannot start before its apparition to human consciousness and knowledge. Before this discovery of the world, there are worlds in contact, but most of them don't know each other. We are in the 16th century. There are grappes de systèmes sans lien. In the representation of the known world, which preceded the discovery of America by the Europeans, the world in its physical reality, its proportion, its human and cultural diversity does not exist for anybody, including the Europeans. As a result of the journeys of Columbus and other navigators, we change from an indistinct plurality of worlds, each of them living its own history, to a global conception of the world. The plurality of the imaginary is replaced with a unique representation, the planet Earth. The apparition of this world as a closure leads to the end of the autonomy of worlds and sometimes to the disappearance. Là où l'histoire et les histoires se joignent, finit l'histoire. Le passé, notre passé subi, qui n'est pas encore histoire pour nous, est pourtant là, ici, qui nous l'enseigne. La tâche de l'écrivain est d'explorer ce l'enseignement et de le révéler de manière continue dans le présent et dans l'actuel. Ça, c'est dans le discours antique. The past, our endure space, past, is not yet history for us. The world as a world starts its history with an overwhelming change of representation of space and time. Wars and conquest leads to an eschatology of all particular histories, except for the European and other resisting great nations. Before the shock of relation, capital R, there are histories, but no world yet. After the shock, there is a world, but no more history for them. Quelle mise entre parenthèses de l'histoire des histoires de l'homme devrait toute histoire a décidément été l'exclusion des autres. La géographie soupire. Toutes les terres sont en terre, tous les soleils tombent en terre. Traité du tout monde. Then, as notes Alexandre Coiré, it would be anachronistic to attribute existence to something which is not even conceived. Our world, which such as we know it now, today, a posteriori, is a very young object to the human consciousness. It has been known for 5 centuries only. Tous les peuples sont jeunes dans la totalité monde, nous sommes tous jeunes et anciens sur les horizons. Glissant's novel, le 4e siècle, 4th century, shows by this symbolic calculation that history is a shock of fiction. He says also, history is desire. The 4th century, in the title of the book, is the present date. It shows that he's counting the time as if the story of the world starts when Americas were discovered and the world was unified. So we should count all the various histories with negative numbers. Here appears the relation, capital R, produced by Glissant as a counter category for the long linear history of European calendars. It points to the lacunaire, in the manner of Césaire, calendrier lacunaire. Quelque chose là-dessus? Non, not yet. Yeah. Le monde s'est trouvé large de ces pays qui hier encore s'épaississaient dans la nuit. On a entendu le cri de leurs habitants, le sang de terre a coulé dans la terre. In Glissant's Poetics, the memory of what was there before the shock of the relation paradoxically starts with its end. For the African of the Americas, from Brazil to North America, before the one of the ship and the middle passage, really, I don't know. I was somebody else. Time for me, history for me, starts with this shock. My history and the story of the world are one and the same. Nous sommes les racines de la relation. Car la véritable genèse des peuples de la Caraïbe, c'est le ventre du bateau négrier et l'antre de la plantation. Thus, if Europeans discover the world through the navigators and the heliocentrism of Copernicus, the native of the Americas and the Africans discover it through war, genocide, and the slave trade. The human psyche is memory, inaccessible deep memory. Glissant says that we were born out of a degenesis or ungenesis, degenese. So, let's talk about the immanence of the relation. There is no overall possible observatory of relation, capital R. Relation is an immanent topos with no outside. Glissant insists, different everywhere, it is the same for every one of us. It goes on saying, découvreur et découvert s'équivalent dans la relation. And this is because a chain possesses two ends. Any chain possesses two ends. For one chain person and for the one who is holding the chain, each of them sings his own, each of them sings his own imaginary and fragmentary version of the predicament. You see Caliban here and Prospero on the other side, and both of them have a so-called different history. But this is only one theater and only one play, and the play is the chain. The rest is their imaginary, and that imaginary they cannot teach, they cannot tell that story to each other. But they are that reality that they are chained. The past even through this story is unknown and untold, it is present. So every one of the opponent have to know that he doesn't know the story of the other. This is what Glissant called la part d'ombre, the shadow part of each other. This is very important for communication because the communication in Glissant never is never achieved. There is always a part that you will never know. Under the pressure of the shock, everything changes. Some nation becomes nègre without knowing it. Others become Indians. The first African captured in the Gold Coast didn't know the name of Gold Coast. Know that he didn't even know that he was African. The naming is pure desire, but not his desire. And the same word for African, because African is a pan-continental name which designates him when he or she steps out of the slave ship. Then he is the African. He becomes African when he ceases to be African. Bien sûr, je ne concevais pas que j'étais africain. L'Afrique n'est vraiment l'Afrique aux yeux des autres qu'au moment de la conquête. C'était du tout nouveau. Against the paradigm of the contemporary paradigm called global history, Glissant proposes relation, capital R, as a new region of the world. He wrote a book called La Nouvelle Région du Monde. His discourse is opaque. That new region of the world has a discourse that is opaque and subjective, because human beings make history but also endure it. They live in an empire of signs, as Roland Barthes said, rather than in an objective reality which can be described. For those historians, Glissant called them anxious positivists, everything must be clear and simple. But Glissant insists the world in its reality is fiction. And you can read in Spinoza, there is two types of reality. Fiction première, fiction seconde. First fiction, second fiction. That's it. And you have to manage with that. The relation, la relation complexe, ardue, imprévisible est le feu majeur des poétiques à venir. Le cri du monde devient parole. Alors, il faut se rappeler que, pourquoi parole? Je devrais même dire ça en créole, parole. Et pourquoi? Parce que dans la poésie, il n'y a pas de phrase. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. No. Well, why parole? Why parole? This is what it says. Because parole doesn't, in Glissant, parole doesn't come from Saussure. No. It comes from Creole. Parole. What is parole? Well, to know a word, you have to know the language around, so I cannot explain. But anyway, you have to know this is not parler. Because parler doesn't exist, really, it's se parler, which counts. Talk to each other. So, but what I wanted to say that, just point out that in poetry, you have, this is not language, this is parole. You say words, not phrases, not sentences, not propositions. It's not true, it's not false. No, this is power. Okay. Let's talk about the obsession of the conquerors, the obsession of the European conquerors. Oneness, the world one, the one world, as opposed to the two mondes, un monde, tout monde. Pour la première fois, le temps les prenait dans son ventre, plus énorme que l'espace de la mer. Des deux côtés de la barque ont disparu les rivages du fleuve. Quel est donc ce fleuve qui n'a pas de mi-temps? Est-il seulement un en avant? Cette barque ne vogue-t-elle pas en éternité aux limites d'un non-monde fréquenté par nul ancêtre? The no world of the captive correspond to the one world of the conqueror. Oneness is, as a concept, reunites under the same system the practical and the mystical power of the doctrine of being. L'être, being. By surrounding the planet, the conqueror at last achieved the ultimate dream of global unity. But the reality of the world, of the human being that lives in the world, is diversity, not unity. And the difficulty of the world is for each other to understand each other. But that is a dream. And in Glissant, the thing is always partial somehow, the shadow part of the other. Anyway, it's normal. If you talk to somebody, even for a long time, you can hear what he says, you can see his face, you can see his gesture, but you cannot read his mind. And you will never know what's in it. There's no access to each other. The apologue of Micromégas de Voltaire. Micromégas has a nephew because he visited the planet because in Sirius, in the sky, they became telepathic. So the real problem is to hide their thought. And they have a lot of problems with that. So they heard that on Earth there is something called the language, which is extremely convenient to hide what you have to say. This is it. So, global unity. Yes. C'est deux côtés là-bas. Ah non. Ah, je vais en arrière, là. Les flèches qui montent.
C'est un peu comme la citation, en fait.
Oui, c'est ça, voilà. Et voilà. Regarde. Et voilà que la Terre devenait une. Et quand cette densité se confirmait, l'un mandaté par l'imaginaire. So, as I said before, history is a shock of fictions. Every side dreams of something. Fiction in action, fiction in discourses. In the great poem, Les Indes, Indies, and this poem, paradoxically, is less fictitious than the real story tells. Because the discoverer comes and they were not looking for Americas, they were looking for Indies. So they call them Indies, and so I'm a West Indian, for some reason. And I was in Fall Creek among the Sioux, and they said, "Hey, you are the Indian, not us, because I'm a West Indian, somehow." But they were not Indian. So, yeah. Pour les conquérants de la nuit nue, l'Inde est imaginaire. Mais sa révélation ne l'est pas. Et si les Indes ne sont pas de ce côté où tu te couches, qu'importe, un, je te dirai, un de l'Ouest, afin que je regagne mon rêve. Où sont tes Indes, toi? Je sais là-bas un peuple que je ferai, dont je ferai commerce, que j'attellerai à ta mamelle. For Alexander Koyré, the epistemologist, this immense symbolization constitutes our representation of the world today. Oneness, writes Glissant, is like an endomorph God who dreams of himself in a poetic ecstasis. Today, this imaginary completeness explodes and collapses under the inner contradiction of its project, which consists in affirming that the world and the earth are the same thing. For 5 centuries, the Western project, because the Western world is not a place, it's not at West, it's a project, it's not a cardinal situation. For 5 centuries, the Western project entered this confusion. One can say, I say that. But the world, since its unification, has never been homogeneous, but always what Glissant called a chaos world. Car ce qui manque éternellement à l'homme, c'est ce rêve réalisé, l'œuvre. So the conquest has never been achieved. Ce qu'il faut à l'unité du monde, c'est cette part du monde qui, frémissante dans son être, est là, grévée d'inexistence. So after reaching the frontiers of all worlds in the world, as Édouard says, that there is no places in the world that have been touched by colonization. The Western project enters its endo phase of implosion because so many worlds oppressed and partly destroyed are together larger than the one world. In history, one has to take the dreamed world into account, and this is in the poems of Glissant, poem complet, a part called Pays réel, real pays, pays réel, pays rêvé, dream world and real world. The one world realizes his hidden face, the true monde that suddenly asserts its presence. To conceive the true monde, one has to surrender all representations and place himself in it and endure it. This position within the true monde gives an unstable and chaotic status in opposition to the clarity and the simplicity of the one world. You got to be inside. But it is inescapable because you are necessarily inside. To read the true monde, one has to enter the erratic movement of natural language, sounds. For the one world, in its absorbing project, everybody shares the same temporality, but this is not the case of the true monde. If the European nation, after the collapsing of the colonial empires, had not at the same time erased their memory of it, they would understand better the contemporary migration phenomenon of today. It seems that the true monde is paying back a visit to return to the Ammon to its surprise. It is very strange that how the Europeans don't understand why the Africans today from the former French colony, for example, are arriving in France. Of course, the country has been destroyed, so by the French, so they go to France to get what they lose, what they lost. So modernity and tradition. Modernity is a word strictly reserved for Western and Westernized production. It's a culture. The creativity of others is relegated to tradition. Even the critique of modernity is modern. The question of environment, ecology is modern. Even This is even true for art, music, and so on. In brief, always listen to modernity or moderns, and therefore Western art. Franz Fanon says yes, he wants to be modern when he writes, I must not forget that the real jump into present is to introduce myself into invention. But Glissant notes in his novel, Malmort, this is a novel, we cannot name anything. We have been ruined in ourselves. Our speech is impossible and borrowed. Nevertheless, he considers that the relation has nothing to do with tradition. We are trapped between, this is a paradox, a modernity which dissolves us and a tradition which confines us. Modernized country protect the tradition as a modern gesture. Plus, history is not a long thing. History in Europe started in the late 18th century. L'Anglais du Frénois. Before there was no historian, there were historiographer, not historian. So history is a new thing. 2nd century is not much history. Modernity is a word strictly reserved. So I see counterexample. I search for counterexample, but in the end, modernity and Western way of life looks desperately tautological. The one world controls the science, the technology, and the content of all education, including humanities and philosophy. Western Germany seems without alternative. The parity of culture exists only in arts, and this is no minor victory. So, if relation capital R is a destructive shock and a historical unification attempt to erase the diversity of the true monde and the domination of the one world. But the relation small r replaces the concept of strict and individual identity by an identity relation. It is not a root identity, but spreads in networks and rhizomes. It's interesting to talk about roots because we say roots and people are looking for and searching for the roots, but we are the roots. Young Martiniquans asked me something about the roots. I said, but I'm the ancestor. Don't look for the ancestor. I'm an ancestor. He's an ancestor. We are ancestors. And you have to start thinking from the present time, and that search for the roots has reversed the problem. If you look in a book like Simon Weil, called the rooting, I think. The Simon Weil is when you are there, you have to dig to be there, and this is what roots are concerned. Roots are not someplace else. That you have to find your way there, and there is a word that when you work on Glissant or other Martiniquez writer, you have to really get that word. It's called fouiller. But in French, fouiller is to dig. It's a transitive verb. You dig something. But fouiller is like dig. You don't know, but you dig. That's all. You dig in despair, you dig as profound as you can. But interpersonal relations are opaque. In any relation between people lies a shadow part that is inaccessible. The incompleteness is a great preoccupation among philosophers. For Levinas, for example, it is impossible for I to reach to you. In Lacan, it's very clear also on sexual relations. For two people in the dialogue, the subject hears what the other is saying or showing, but he is not, or he or she does not have access to the previous whole, as I mentioned. So it's called the it's called the manque consenti and lack of consented too. There's always something missing, and the Glissant is very deeply into incompleteness of human action. This is the reason why he thinks of Caromon, and he says that the relation is not an idealistic way of future. It's just something that we have to take into account and say, well, life is difficult. It's not going to be better tomorrow. Yeah. We have to fight every day. Plus tomorrow, it's like yesterday. Because time is not something that passes like that. Time is the present, and in the present there is always a part of the past and a part of the future. And the future and the past are thoughts that we are thinking, because we always think of the past and the future during the present, and not looking backward or forward. This is an Augustinian type of thing that we say that all times are present time. So the opacity of the relation does not lead to what I call the indifference of difference, indifference to difference, which mark the individualistic individualism. Each world, each culture of the two modes is a prism through which the other worlds are present. And he says, when you write in a language, you have to have all the languages, you have to know that all the languages on earth are present too. And the little island of Martinique, so tiny, is in the world because his history contains 5 centuries of the history of the world. So identity relation is not an idea, but some kind of a wish, a poetic gift for future time, where people, compelled by the expansion of the world demography, will accept each other's capacity. And this sounds like, this wish of Glissant is in echo with Derrida's conflictual hospitality, which supposes also hostility, and this is why he constructed hospitality. So when you accept the other one, but you know that you're going to be in conflict with him. Realization, as a, not that. Landscapes. I'm going to finish with that. Landscape in the Caribbean literature is not bucolic. Everyone would call them paradise on earth. But, Martinique. But they are sites of memory because they are signs. Glissant says landscapes are monuments. They mark the genocide of the Caribbean, the Caribs, the land of slave labor. The forests are supposed to be hidden places for maroons on the run and so on. And one has to keep this in mind when he walks into the forest. And if he keeps that in mind, he will never lose his way. Out of these historical traces, the Caribbean landscape is impenetrable, full of traps, snakes, and big black spiders. In contrast with the global world in the two modes, there is no world that is greater or bigger than others, and no superior culture or art or literature that we know that. And let me have that. Thank you, sir. Okay. Literary criticism hesitated on its role and practices. First, interpretative discourse seems in contradiction with the immanence of Glissant's Poetics, which dig a sui generis space, a creator of meaning, which requires a sort of autopoiesis. Interpretation works from complexity to simplicity, ceteris paribus. But Glissant and other writers, like Rushdie, imaginary homers, discard such a practice, saying that reality is complex and often incomprehensible, but should not be and could not be simplified. Each time literary criticism meets a poetic of real consistence, it finds the opportunity of its own transformation. Glissant notes that writing is saying literally, which implies that reading literally is required in return. Only the poets, he says that, only the poets, I think he copied that from Goldwin. Only the poets knows how to survive the incompatibility of sign and in their stability. They tremble like a flame. For Glissant, poetry is not a declarative or prophetic discourse. Poetry is, as I said, power. Sometimes it feels that Creole language is made only of tropism. Okay, that's it.
Tu vas par ici.
Ah non, si, je vais essayer.
Ah bah oui, oui.
Mais, bon,
Le soleil il est
un peu fort.
Let's, you can save your applause for when he's finished reading and he's in the shade. He has this part of the shade.
No. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Ah bah oui, but no, because you cannot see. Oh, yes, I will.
So you'll kind of take a seat. Jonathan is unjamming.
Yeah, c'est bien, merci. Okay. I'm going to read L'archipel des grands chaos. This is a part of an oratorio that I wrote. But Glissant wrote the poems, of course, and I did the music at some time, and I read it many times someplace. Here's Édouard. Okay. Les grands chaos se sont venus. Les grands chaos sont sur la place. Il n'est tempête que de sang. Voilier sanglant, la race blanche des frégates la race blanche des frégates. Je ne vois d'oiseau qu'apeuré. Il n'y a pas eu de combattant, mais une seule éternelle défaite. Ainsi, les cafres, les bectres, les marrons, les marronnies, les pelés, les cinards, les saramakas, et vélons de toute Éthiopie. Femmes qui naviguent un enfant mort au sein. Femme qui va un chevreau mort au sein. Les grands chaos en sont venus. Les grands chaos sont sur la place. Cette île, puis ces îles toutes unies, nommez-les, criez-les, le temps est là. Ô pays, pur visage impur et blessé. Une autre terre m'appelle, cette Afrique. Et ce ne l'est pas, elle me fut terre silencieuse. Mon noir pays, miroir brisé. Je t'ai nommé terre blessée où crie le noir silence qui m'étreint. Les grands chaos s'en sont venus, les grands chaos sont sur la place. Drapés de plaies, nommez-les. Vêtements de plaies, criez-les. Beauté sur vous manant, sous les rois, les prêtres, les capitaines, dansant de cette gloire, vous errez, disant qui nous fera science de nos plaies, qui redevance de nos fins. Tant de moraux qu'à plein bord, tant de moraux qu'à plein bord. L'ordre des mots ne distrait pas le monde, l'ordre des mots distrait le monde, l'ordre des mots. Ceux qui sonnent musique inventée nue entendent la parole cassée, la chaleur fauve, la chaleur fauve du chaos. Les grands chaos s'en sont venus. Les grands chaos sont sur la place. Et voilà. Je ne sais pas trop parce que my emotion are coming back. Thank you.
If anybody needs to leave, this is a good time to do it, but Professor COURSIL will, of course, take your questions. Merci.
Okay, thank you. In the blurb of your talk, it was stated that, that Glissant's poetics was not necessarily a concept, or not even an idea, but you think that within it is the idea of division. So I'm wondering to what extent it being a concept or an idea is necessarily in conflict with the idea of division. So the question is, in a simple sense, for it to be a concept, is there a conflict between it being a concept and idea, or your understanding of it as division? Is that a conflict?
Yeah. I understand. The nature of the concept is, in metaphysics at least, it goes to objects. Essence, the object of the concept. And concept is one sense of the being, and the object is the other thing. But division is mainly between objects. Let's two glasses, one glass. It can be abstract. So the concept of glass, you can conceive them. You can have a sense of a very knowledgeable type of thing about things. But now I take those two glasses and I say, bing! The shock of those two glasses is not a concept. It's an event. With time. And differential semantics is interested in what happened between words. I would say that. Classical semantics would be interested in explaining words. So the relationship between is a way of conceptualizing the division, but the division cannot be conceptualized because it's an event, and an event never repeats itself. So there is no identity of the event. It's like I fell. I was so very happy with this car. I bought the same one. You can say that because there is an identity of concept. But you cannot say I was so happy with this horse. I bought the same one because there is something that is unique there, and the reason why it cannot be conceptualized. This is because of that uniqueness. I hope that this. There is indeed and truly the difference between idealism, which is an objective type of thing, since Plato and so on, and differential things. And now when you have difference of differences together, you make a network of differences, you get no objects. So let's say, you want to know who I am. So you say, well, are you the neighbor of John? Yes. Yeah, now who's John? John is the neighbor of Alfred. And who is Alfred? Is the neighbor of somebody. And I'm my own neighbor at the end, because, and I exist because I exist as a neighbor. I don't exist by myself. The choses en soi, as the thing itself. I exist only because I'm in relation with others. So, this is a very important question in Glissant anyway, in philosophy anyway. The fact that either you have an object as such, which is covered by its essence somehow, or either you have an object that you learned it existed because, but that is not that, and that is not that, and that is not that, and a bundle of negation give you the object. Plus, this is my last one on that. Plus, in the Greek logic of Hegel, Wissenschaftlerlogik, you get the last chapter. You got to be really strong to get to that last chapter anyway. last chapter called Theory of Measure, whatever. And in that chapter, he introduces the concept of integration. So what is that concept of integration? Well, it is in classical, the doctrine of being. You have an object, and you have a class, and you put that object in that class. A cat, and it belongs to the class of cats with a lot of properties. But Hegel said, no. Look at that cat passing by. He has in himself all the properties, and he verifies all the properties that makes it cat. So if the whole is in the part, and not the part in the whole. A human being is a human being because he possesses all the properties that qualify as a human being. It doesn't belong to a class. This is the reason why there is such a question over the destruction of the doctrine of being. Monsieur?
It's really wonderful to have you back here. I don't even know if I have a question. I was struck, and I'm not sure I understood, when you were talking about Glissant's conception of local norm, of language beyond language, or encompassing all language. I was wondering if it had anything to do, or was in any way related to something like Christeva's conception of Korah.
Possible. I would not say yes or no of that. But I would say that he says, he's got a sentence that he was repeating all the time, he said, I write in the presence of all languages. And God knows that he was not gifted for languages. But he was always saying that. Plus, if you read, for example, Césaire, if you read a poem of Césaire, in the Art miraculous weapon. And you say, well, this is not art miraculous, this is, in French it doesn't mean anything, because the weapon don't make miracle. So you look in Spanish and you say, miracle. And I say, oh yeah, miracle. So you need already two languages. And then you go, the poem calls prophecy. And everybody jumps on you and says, you see the prophets, the guy who's saying things and leading his people, and so on. Prophecy is in Greek, because the man is an Hellenist. Okay, and it means to show Paul Fagna, make visible by talking about it. Visible. And so if you and the first line is là où l'aventure garde les yeux clairs. So you get yeux clairs, bright eyes. So you got, but yeux clairs doesn't mean yeux clairs, because in Creole, yeux clairs is the way we talk about a woman who has a bad life. So you need to read that poem, Creole, Greek, Spanish, and so on. You get all languages there, and if you don't have those languages, you cannot get into that poem. That's it. Oui? Yes?
Thank you very much. No, I just wonder, because if the division is an event, and as you said, if there is no unity, what is the relation between diversity and difference?
Diversity and difference. Diversity and differences. Well, this is not, well, diversity is more general than differences, or less. It depends on which way you look at it. diversity and differences. First of all, I would try to see how they have the same meaning first, and then to eliminate what they are, on what count this is different. But in fact, to answer your question, I would not fall into the trap of explaining idle terms. I would make a language game, as Wittgenstein would say, and I would try to say all the uses of differences and all the uses of diversity, and I say, well, at some point it doesn't fit. But I'm not going to give a concept over the diversity, and because precisely it's against the conceptualization, and differences, as we were talking just before, is really what you try to reach when you want to avoid concepts. A good metaphysician like you and me, could always say, oh, I know the essence of this, the essence of that. I mean, you can explain, meaning you can explain this and that. But how a child learns his language, as Navinis would say, then he doesn't learn language, he learns his world. And it isn't, at some point you have to make a difference between a cat and a dog, and you make differences all the time. And frankly, up to my old age, I don't know what a cat is. I would not be able to explain that, but I know the difference, this is a difference. Oh, that is whiskey. No, this is not. This different. What is the essence of whiskey? I don't know a word of it. And so on. So we live in difference. We have but somehow the conceptualists, anytime they see a hall, they put a relation over it, like a bridge to go from. No, this is not the way. You have to go deep in that and find the chaos between those two words, instead of it's really like an architecture. This is the difference. The difference is a gap between two words. You have to have all the whole language that goes between those two things. This is the reason why somehow your question was a trap.
We'll take 2 more questions and then we can have more conversations. There's a reception just next door.
I love your perspective on the tension in the academy between supporting the notion of one world and divesting us all from it. Even as we sit here, many people in the room have a lot of responsibility. We've all been on hiring committees. We've all done all those things. And I'm going to summarize it by saying, in my experience, we hire the person best suited to neutralize the destruction of one world. And to me, that's now beyond race, that's beyond class. I'm not after those precepts anymore. It seems we're incapable of mentally sustaining the very idea that you've been taught us. And you are my elder, so I'm asking you from your perspective on what game we're playing.
Glissant would have been very happy to hear the remark, because he was saying, the relation is not idealistic. I'm not giving you the solution for happiness. And plus, in philosophy today, we know that a relation never achieves its end. In the bridge, you always have to jump in the river to get to the other side, because it's always lagging apart. And the relationship you have to the person you love is always lacking of something that you will never know about. Because the impossibility to, as Levinas would say very clearly, the impossibility for me to reach you totally. But this is so important, because of course it's bad, but it's good, because this is your freedom somehow. But freedom and despair goes together somehow. But don't despair because Césaire said that. He says, well, Despair, let's go to French. Despair, désespoir. Like in Kierkegaard, désespoir, wow. But this is only when you are in despair that you need hope, espoir. If you are the strongest guy on the street, you don't need courage. You need courage when you are weak. So this is when you are in the depth of suffering that you need you need that thing. So indeed, the situation is never easy to cope with. And Derrida put it very clearly with hospitality and hostility, saying hospitality, because the best guest you have, 3 days good, 5 days good, and months is hard. and so the ideal thing, we are finished with that. It's like poetry and bucolic, and we are not in sorrow, we are in that difficult way of being in the present time, and having to cope with that, to not have always a solution for everything that's going to happen. And precisely in the migration type of phenomenon that we have today.
Last question for this.
Thank you for your lecture. I wanted to ask you about your practice as a musician and what languages that don't require translation and what your experience as a trumpeter brings to your reading of Glissant.
Between those two things there is a gap, but I would say that language is a system of value and values and signs. Music is a system of values without signs. So of course you can do military music and things like that and make a big sign of all the music, but you just only have the sound. We talk about phrasing, for example. We say, well, phrasing, syntax, language and music is about the same. Sound, it's like a seduction. You cannot. Seduction is it's not easy to talk about seduction, because seduction is to maintain a line. Because if you have a gap in your seduction, the whole thing is gone. So music is always on values. Values that make you tremble, values that make you clap or whatever, in places like in Martinique, you have the very old lady, the grandmothers, they are sitting on the chair and they're extremely, dignified. They got the handkerchief and they do like that, and the music, and they do that. Because they cannot resist to the fact that music is transporting them from bottom to up. It's like you're in church and singing Gregorian things. You say, oh, and you think that you have a mind that is floating into the air. A lot of musicologists are doing the job, but I never heard any who told me how to reach somebody with music. And of course, because I'm not trying to reach people. I'm trying to be available. This is on the other side, not closed, opened. But not open like a generous person. No. I put the thing in the middle of the road, and if you want it, you cross the road. you pick it up. Because poetry and rhetoric is not the same thing. The rhetoric, you talk to people and you bring things to people. Poetry, music, art, painting, and so on, you should stay there. and you wait for people to come. And it's like digging a well. If you want water, don't turn the faucet. Dive into the well. Otherwise, no water is coming. The water is not going to go. You know, it is the question. The generosity is not a question of art. You know, it's a question of it's not, for me at least. It's just only you have values, and sometimes it doesn't work. You know, this is it. You know, and this is not like text, because the text you can write and write and write and write. Live music. Today it's fine, and the day after that it's awful, and when it's awful you call it blues, you know. This is it. Okay.